Sports with Sports Nightly. First, tonight's sports headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tim Curran. Starting out with some Major League Baseball action. Right now, Cardinals and Cubs are all tied up at 1 in the top of the 7th in Game 1 of their doubleheader. Blue Jays and Orioles are just about to get underway, and so are the Red Sox and the Yankees. Then first pitch is expected in a few moments between the Nationals and Braves, as well as the Mets and the Marlins. Moving on to the NBA playoffs, got a couple finals from earlier today. The Raptors took down the Nets 134-110, and in overtime, the Nuggets took down the Jazz 135-125. One game in progress, 76ers lead the Celtics 23-22 with just under 90 seconds to go in the first quarter. Then coming up at 8 o'clock, the Mavericks will square off with the Clippers. And in the NHL playoffs, got one game in progress. Colorado Avalanche have a big lead over Arizona, 4-0 to score with about 8:10 remaining in the second period. Live inside the Husker Sports Network studios, I'm Curran.
Your state, your team, your show. This is Sports Nightly.
4th and a half yard at the 6 of Colorado. Now it's going to be an empty set. Snap back. Adrian's going to run off the right side. He's in there for a first down. He's in there for a touchdown. Nebraska takes the lead back here at Folsom Field.
Now let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Ben McLaughlin.
Here we are, Monday. Welcome. Another week of Sports Nightly here on the Husker Sports Network. Hope you had a good weekend. Summer's dwindling away. A lot of the schools are open back up. UNL began their first week online today, but I was driving around campus over the weekend. It was packed. People were driving around, looked good. Great to have the kids back in Lincoln. All right, here's what we have coming up on the program tonight. Husker football has picked up a commitment, lost a commitment. It's going to be, I think, kind of crazy in the recruiting world in the coming months. Greg Smith from Hale Varsity going to join us to give us the latest on that here in a couple of minutes. Hour number 2, Jeremiah Searles will stop by. We'll get his take on some of the topsy-turvy news of the last couple of days involving Big Ten football and the decision-making process and how that affects everything moving forward. It'll be interesting to get Jeremiah's take on that. Also in hour number 2, Scott Docterman of The Athletic will be here. He's been following the Iowa parents, who were the first parent group in the Big Ten Conference to organize, put together a letter, hand-deliver it to the Big Ten office, asking for some details for their decision to cancel the college football season. We'll get Scott's take on what's going on in Iowa City and that movement. That did include a couple of doctors. A couple of doctors whose son plays on the Hawkeye team. They were the ones that kind of took the lead on that plan. So we'll hear from Scott coming up in the second hour. Third hour, Ben will take us back to the weekend, our weekend rewind. A lot of Major League Baseball. Not a lot of NBA because there's just one game over the weekend with the playoffs starting today, but there'll be some things we can jump into on that. We'll also have our weekend winners coming up in hour number 3 as well. Phone lines, they are always there. They are always available to you at 531-500-4686. That's 531-500-4686. That also doubles as our U.S. Cellular text line. U.S. Cellular, the official wireless provider of Husker Athletics, at 531-500-4686. If you want to shoot us off a text, if you don't want to pick up the phone and call and talk to us the old-fashioned way, you can do it that way as well. Let's start, Ben, with some of the activities over the weekend, and I'm going to kind of start with what happened today. And that was more acknowledgement from people in the Big Ten that there really wasn't a vote taken on this thing. Sandy Barber, the athletic director at Penn State, had a Zoom call today and just said, well, it's unclear whether there was ever a vote or not. This kind of goes along with Minnesota President Joan Gable, who said basically we didn't vote. We just had a deliberative process and where we came to a decision. This keeps the spotlight, the fire, Ben, on Commissioner Kevin Warren, who was evasive when he was asked by Dave Revson of BTN last week about was this a unanimous decision, and he would not give an affirmative or a non-affirmative answer. I will say this. Sandy Barber's the AD, like Bill Moose here at Nebraska. The ADs, it's not their call. It is the president/chancellor's call. But Ted Carter was on our Lincoln affiliate, KLIN, on Friday, and he indicated that there was a vote taken. So there's so much up in the air, and it continues to make the Big Ten, quite frankly, look pretty bad.
Yeah, and the worst part about it is we haven't heard anything from the league office. I mean, they could eliminate all of this with a simple statement, put together some type of video statement or something to just kind of address all these burning questions that everybody has. It's one thing, Greg, if it's just a Nebraska issue. If it's just one school, and whether it's the correct opinion or not, is being insubordinate or speaking out when they perhaps shouldn't. That's one thing. But when you have multiple schools and multiple schools of the caliber of the ones that are speaking out, that's when it's becoming clearly a divisive issue. And the big problem with people that have been in the Big Ten for a long time is that was kind of their one source of character, was their unity and how they're always together and, you know, stand as one and all those cliches. That's kind of erased with this issue when you see some big-time powers that, you know, even take Nebraska out of the situation. When you're talking about Penn State, Ohio State, and Iowa, and Michigan, and some of these other programs that are voicing their displeasure, it becomes an issue. And that's where you're starting to see the tone of those national writers turn from venom at Nebraska to, we have a bigger issue going on. And the big problem is there's no transparency with the league office with what's happening and how they reach their decision. Again, this could all have been eliminated if they would have just, I mean, even still, like, any time we're welcome to a statement or clarification at any time. It's already past due, but even if it came out tomorrow, I think we could all sleep a little easier knowing how they arrived at their decision, instead of having petitions by Justin Fields going around, letters from multiple schools, parents that, you know, from what's been released and reported, Greg, I don't know that there's been a statement from parents that have had less than 80 signatures on it. So you're talking about the majority of these football teams. It's not just a few parents, disgruntled parents from here and there. We're talking about a lot of parents here and the majority of the members of the team. And so whereas this supposedly began as just a Nebraska issue, has turned into a multiple school issue, but now you're dealing with petitions that have hundreds of thousands of signatures on it, and again putting even more pressure on the league office for clarification. I think we're all in agreement that the likelihood of them changing their decision is pretty small. That based on all the information that you get when you read articles and hear from experts, the idea that they change their course now doesn't seem likely, but at least eliminate some of the thoughts in people's minds as to how you arrived at this decision and why you made the decision that you did. They had a chance of doing it right away with the Dave Revson interview, but they didn't accomplish any of that. And it's been crickets from the league office, specifically the commissioner, who's taken the biggest amount of criticism in the last week to do that. So it was definitely an interesting day and an interesting weekend on that front.
Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com, who we have on during the college football season, tweeted this over the weekend. A Big Ten administrator has told me our league is seriously divided, and all of it is playing out publicly. You mentioned the Justin Fields petition that he put out yesterday, "We want to play," and it had, within a couple of hours, over 100,000 signatures. I kind of wish that would have just been college football players, not just fans and everybody else who jumped on board. I wish he would have limited it to that. I think it would have had maybe more impact if he had done that. You also mentioned the players' parents, and Nebraska's parents jumped on board over the weekend. I believe Glenn Snodgrass, who's Garrett's dad, head football coach at York High, was kind of the ringleader of this thing. He helped kind of organize this along with Gene Benhart, who's Bryce's dad. Bryce is the offensive lineman. They kind of, I think, grabbed the bull by the horns of this thing and put together a letter, got over 80 Husker parents to sign on to this thing. It's going to be hand-delivered to the league office. Iowa's was delivered on Friday. Similar letters from Ohio State, from Penn State. I believe there's now one coming from Michigan to go to the league office, where these players want answers. They want to be told, why did you make this decision, when you made this decision? And then on the medical side of things, this was really odd over the weekend. A cardiologist at the University of Michigan came out and said based on the medical information he was told the Big Ten was using to make this decision, he goes, they are using a flawed study. It was a study done by a doctor in Great Britain. He then came out and says, I don't know what the Big Ten is, but they're not analyzing this information right. So here's a cardiologist at the University of Michigan, one of the more prestigious medical schools in the country, going, I don't think they got this right. And so that got added into the mix of the weekend with even medical people, and that goes back to something you and I talked about last week. You keep getting so many differing opinions. One medical expert says this is good, another one says it's not. This one says this will work. This one says it won't work. It's so confusing to get all of that. And I was looking at Glenn Snodgrass's timeline on Twitter, Ben, and he just said he talked to Garrett, and Garrett's like, I don't know what to do now. I don't know what to do. All I've done every fall is play football. Now I don't know what to do. I mean, my heart goes out to these players. They are swimming right now in a cloud, and they don't know which direction to go.
I know, and that's the frustrating thing, and that's where I tip my cap to Justin Fields. I mean, he theoretically, Greg, he should be the last one that's organizing this and putting something like this together within the league. I mean, between he and Micah Parsons, who had already declared for the draft, those two are the most valuable players in terms of an NFL career that this league has to offer. And you've got one of them making the decision to forego his senior or season and enter his name into the draft, which is unsurprising. But then you have another player who doesn't have a ton to gain other than just playing another year of college football and trying to win a national championship, basically leading this thing. And that's where it's admirable. It'd be so easy for him to turn his focus to the draft here in next year and just prepare himself for the millions of dollars that he's about to make. And instead, you have him kind of leading the charge with the players, which is admirable. And yeah, that's back to your point about the cardiologist. This just feeds into the idea of the confusion that we're all living by right now. Whether you're in the Big Ten country, SEC country, Pac-12, Texas, doesn't matter. We're all getting such differing opinions and information that it makes this situation hard to understand and frustrating if you're on the other side of it. I mean, if you're in the SEC right now and you're wanting to play football, you're fine with what your medical professionals are telling you. But if you're in the Big Ten and you want to play football, you're frustrated by what the medical professionals are telling you. And I think that's where a lot of people are throwing their hands up going, excuse me, we need more explanation about this because, it's okay for certain teams to play but not others. And now we're hearing that what your information is based off of is false. It isn't necessarily accurate. That's where the answers want to come in, and people want to go raise their hand and have their question answered. And it makes a lot of sense, but I think for us sitting here right now doing this talk show as we've done the last few weeks, and I've gotten the question a bunch. I know you've gotten the question a bunch. I got it a couple times even this weekend. What is it that the Big Ten saw that changed course, from the release of the schedule to now, and what information are they hearing, and why is it fair for them to pull that plug where they're at and speak for us here at Nebraska when things are different and we're doing things the way that we're supposed to be doing them? Again, I don't know that we ever get answers to those questions based on what we have not heard from the league office the last few days, but that's where everybody's frustrated aligned, is because you have experts, professionals, people that are studying this virus every single day. They can't even agree on whether it's safe or not, and that's the frustration that is setting with a lot of people.
I do think we will hear something from the league in the coming days. I don't think they can just bury their head in the sand. I don't think that's people aren't going to accept that. They want something from the league office, some transparency. We saw some of that from the Pac-12 last week when they released some of the medical data that they were analyzing for that. Big Ten just cannot just stick their head in the sand like an ostrich and act like nothing's going on when you have all these parents that are asking for answers, student athletes that are asking for answers. One of the things that Kevin Warren said when he got the commissioner, he was going to be very concerned about the mental health of his student athletes. Well, right now that's being tested because the mental health is not real good for a lot of these guys. In fact, I saw a tweet from Larry Widman, who has done some work with the athletic department in the past. He's a psychologist. He said, like most, I'm not privy to the medical information that led to this decision. From my area of expertise, I've never seen this level of mental and psychological distress before in high school and college student athletes. It's real, and I'm not sure the powers fully understand this. That's a point worth taking. Before we head to the break, recruiting news. Huskers lose one, gain one. Keep the class at 14 over the weekend. The linebacker Will Schweitzer from California decommits from Nebraska, and that was quickly followed up by a commitment from a wide receiver, Ben, from Naples, Florida, and Camonte Grimes. Looks like a pretty good get if they can keep Grimes in the fold until the signing period in December. He's a guy that had a lot of high major offers in this thing. You hate losing Schweitzer because you still need to add some depth to that linebacker spot, but this is a good get, it looks to me anyway, on Grimes.
Yeah, and it's one that I didn't necessarily expect to get. I mean, you looked at his final grouping of schools, and of course Nebraska was in there along with Miami and some other heavy hitters. A lot of the experts predicted him to be a Michigan Wolverine, and I think that is a great get for Nebraska. Number one, you steal him away from another Big Ten school. But again, for the same reasons as we've seen in some other players, Greg, specifically at the wide receiver position, that size is attractive. You know, right now, I mean, I'm so used to looking at, ratings and offers and, geography. The first thing I'm looking at now with wide receivers is their size. And at 6'3", 200 pounds, he certainly fits the mold. And now we're starting to go from year after year of getting recruits of under 6 foot to now that we're starting to stack on, Greg, year after year of receivers that are over 6 foot. And I think that they're addressing that need immediately and often and filling the room up with players that can do both, play outside, but also get guys that can be burners and play inside. Camonte Grimes, hopefully at 6'3", 200 pounds, can come in and be another physical force alongside Omar Manning, alongside Xavier Betts, alongside some of the other commitments in this class, and go be a physical outside receiver. And that's where you get guys that can really shine in that slot position, that Duck R position, like a Wandale, and hopefully like guys like Demarion Houston and Marcus Fleming and some of these younger players, Alante Brown. That's when they can really shine, is when you have guys that are playing their correct position, whereas last year you're looking out there at the 3 receivers on the field and not one of them could get into the ride at the carnival. They're all under that 6 foot mark, and makes it pretty easy to defend when they're playing out of position. So I think getting another body, and number one, and number two, taking him away from some prestigious schools while still tapping into that Florida market is absolutely huge. And I think it's going to make some of those other Florida guys that are on the team right now feel a little more at ease, knowing that they're going to bring more guys in from their state, whether they know when they're playing or not. They get more guys from the Sunshine State in Florida to head up to Nebraska. So it was really disappointing to hear on Schweitzer about his little secret visit to South Bend, and then all of a sudden flipping his commitment to Notre Dame, from decommitting to Nebraska to committing to Notre Dame in a span of 6 hours, and then finding out about his little trip to South Bend. That was really disappointing to hear, but this made it a lot better knowing that you were going to get some more help in the receiver room.
3 wide receivers now in the class. Sean Hardy at 6'3", Latrell Neville 6'4", Grimes 6'3". So, yeah, it's just that room is going to look so different in 12 months from what it did 12 months ago. In 24 months' time, it is going to go from little bitty guys and not much depth to maybe quite a bit of depth and all kinds of size wide receivers in that room. That room has got me excited about the future for Husker football. All right, full boat. That's a lot to get into in our first segment of the program. Again, 531-500-4686. The number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. When we come back, Ben will talk with Greg Smith from Hale Varsity to talk more about the recruiting game and how maybe this shutdown of Big Ten football is going to affect that moving forward. We'll get into that next.
Stop and rolling on a Sports Nightly Monday. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend. Expected some movement with recruiting eventually. Maybe not sure that it would happen as soon as this weekend, but yet here we are. And to help us make sense of the movement in the Husker recruiting front, our good friend Greg Smith from Hale Varsity. Greg, first of all, thanks for joining us, man. Let's start first with how you're holding up with the reaction of the Big Ten and now expecting how that's going to bleed into what's going to be a very hectic challenge for you and try and cover the recruiting landscape in this league for the next couple of months.
Yeah, boy, it's been something. Thanks for having me, by the way. It's been really interesting so far, just seeing all of the fallout of the reaction. And like we kind of said throughout this entire kind of process, the quarantine and the dead period and all of that, there continue to be more questions and answers, it feels like, at every turn. So right now, recruiting kind of took a back burner, like right when the Big Ten kind of made their announcement, and kind of rightfully so, just because of how big it was. Big a deal it was that they went ahead and suspended the season. But it's starting to pick back up because, as you know, recruiting really never ends.
It may still be too early to tell, but we're starting to see a couple of decommitments already, Greg. When you look at players that are committed in this league, at least while the other leagues continue to move forward with their seasons, what type of handcuff does this put on the Big Ten Conference, and what limitations and therefore struggles does it put on this league while you have other leagues dialing up their phone lines of these recruits?
Yeah, I think the immediate thing, and we know that kind of negative recruiting or quote-unquote dirty recruiting happens all the time anyway. So when you're in a situation like this, if your coaches, and it won't be all of them, but I'm sure there are coaches from the SEC, from the Big 12, from the ACC, calling up kids that are on commit list or kids that are on the fence about decisions and just saying, hey, listen, it means more here. We're going to try to play. We're doing, all the things correctly that we can do within our power to be able to make sure that our guys get a chance to play. And we'll see how that shakes out. Like, I'm not totally convinced that in the long run that's going to make a huge difference. I do think that just the pandemic in general has caused kids to be a little skittish about their commitments, especially kids that are far away from the colleges that they committed to. So it'll be a while, and time will tell if we see what it really is and how it really shakes out. But I definitely don't think that will stop coaches from trying to use that as part of their pitch that were already kind of negatively recruited.
And Greg, we could probably, I'm sure there are fans that have already taken that situation of the Big Ten not playing football or negative recruiting, if you will, whether it's true or not, to Will Schweitzer, the 6'4", 215-pound defensive end who decommitted from Nebraska, a few hours later committed to Notre Dame. Let's start first about what you know about this young man. It sounded like he had a great relationship with the coaches, and then obviously, something changed, therefore, in his recruiting and began to pique interest other places and lands at Notre Dame. I don't think it was too surprising to see a commitment, thereafter the decommitment. But what do you take away from what you know about Will Schweitzer and his decision to commit and then decide ultimately that this wasn't the place for him?
Yeah, the commitment that Nebraska got from Will was kind of interesting because it was one of the ones, and Nebraska's had a handful of these throughout kind of the dead period where they've got a commitment from a kid who had not been able to visit the campus kind of officially or unofficially. Like, I've been kind of terming them like these super unofficial visits, and he did that, Will did, with his family, where he came out from California and just kind of walked around campus and just got a feel for Lincoln itself. But that's still not the same as if you get an unofficial visit or even definitely an official visit. And he did have a really good relationship with Nebraska's coaching staff, and he really liked and was excited about the type of role he would have in Eric Chinander's defense. But the issue on this particular case was not necessarily Nebraska playing football or not playing football versus Notre Dame playing football. I think that Will always had Notre Dame as kind of his dream school. And once they offered, and it kind of went under the radar because he didn't publicize it like a lot of kids do when they pick up new offers, out of respect for Nebraska initially, and then he went and took one of those kind of secret unofficial visits to Notre Dame where he walked around, and then that kind of sealed the deal for him, and then he ended up flipping. So it's not a case where he chose because they're playing football. That was just always an offer that he kind of coveted, which definitely happens during the recruiting process.
No doubt. Well said. Greg Smith, Hail Varsity, recruiting on our guest here on Sports Nightly. I'm Ben McLaughlin. Well, the bad news wasn't too bad for long as the Huskers got a commitment from Camonte Grimes, who had Nebraska, of course, in his final group of schools. But going to be honest, Greg, I looked at some of the other schools that were grouped along Nebraska and tried to piece some things together. I know Miami's had a heck of a lot of success recently in their own state. They've had one of the better recruiting classes in the country put together in the last few weeks. I wasn't feeling overly optimistic. Didn't know a lot about Grimes' situation. A lot of the experts predicted him to end up a Wolverine in Ann Arbor. Of course, he says yes to the Huskers. Tell us a little bit about this young man and what he could potentially bring and what you know was the deciding factor in his commitment.
Yeah, Camonte Grimes is a really intriguing prospect for Nebraska. As they continue to load up on receivers that have some nice size to them, and I feel like we're always talking about that. But as that has kind of turned for Nebraska, where it seems like Matt Lubick has put even more emphasis on bringing guys in with size, as Grimes goes about 6'2", 200 pounds, and you watch his film, he's a well-put-together kid. And it's funny because it doesn't look like he's running all that fast on film, but he's constantly running away from people. And in the state of Florida, that's always a great sign, right? So you can't go wrong with that. But you're right. Miami was involved. Michigan was involved as well. I think the deciding factor for Grimes was the way that Scott Frost and Matt Lubick were able to pitch him on how they would use him kind of all over the field in this offense. As you do kind of have two different philosophies offensively between Nebraska and Michigan. And I think a lot of times that can help Nebraska a lot, especially if they get that offense rolling, because you can't help but want to play in that wide open offense.
No question about it. When you look at Camonte and obviously another Florida guy, there's been some chatter, Greg, fair or not, to the Florida kids that have ended up here in the last, specifically this last cycle with Jaden Francois and Henry Gray, that they can be a little flighty. Fair or not, that's a reputation that's out there. What can you say about this coaching staff's just relentless ability to go down here and get kids and maybe add some comfort to those Florida guys that are still here, the Ronald Delancey's, the Marcus Flemings, that we're going to continue to bring guys up here from this state to make you feel partly to make you guys feel more at home, but also to better our football team?
I think that, Ben, that's a really, really key point of continuing to hammer Florida to be able to bring more guys to make you comfortable on the roster. And we talk about that with any number of situations when you're trying to build pipelines, whether it's from the South in general or out West, or if it's in Hawaii. Like, you have to start with a group, get them to stick around, have them have a little bit of success on the football field, and then also you can really start to build things along and you can get something going. But Nebraska's not going to stop recruiting Florida. They have too many ties down there, kind of led by Travis Fisher. We know what they did down at UCF. So that's always going to be an emphasis for this coaching staff. As long as they're around and coaching at Nebraska, they're going to continue recruiting Florida, and hopefully it just continues to get better for them as those guys stay and end up making it onto the football field.
Well, Greg, when I'm starting to piece together a little bit of what's happening right now in the sense of college football, what are you expecting the coach's mentality to be with this, to stay on recruiting? Obviously, they don't have opponents to prepare for now, but how do you expect the coaches to, I don't want to say allot their time, but break down the time that they do get with the recruits and try and, sell Nebraska while they're not playing for a whole nother calendar year, at the very least until the spring, but to try and hold on to these guys that are committed and get guys like Camonte Grimes to commit while they're not playing?
Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of a wild card. As we started off talking about, these other leagues that are playing, the three that are still playing at the Power Five, trying to poach recruits or get guys that are undecided by saying that they're playing. On the flip side of that, teams like Nebraska and other schools in these conferences that aren't playing will be able to have more time to be able to devote towards talking to these recruits and kind of evaluating their board and watching film, because they're not going to have a game to get ready for. Even even right now, if you think about teams in the SEC having to get practice plans ready as they release their schedule and they're starting to get ready for that, they have to turn their eye to that. Nebraska's focus right now can be mostly on recruiting, so that could end up helping them. The problem is that after we kind of went through quarantine with no camps and all and evaluation and new stuff to watch, there's not as much stuff to be able to dive into to really evaluate recruits, so it's really just continuing to build those relationships, but they have ample time to do that now.
Greg, we'll wrap up with this. We got Dasan McCullough from Overland Park committing tomorrow. Looks like an Ohio State lean from here, but obviously around here, Thomas Fedoni from Council Bluffs put out a tweet potentially about his commitment date. Those are two guys that have Nebraska kind of in their final group. Anybody else that we can expect announcements from? And in the case of Fedoni, where are you at with him right now? And Nebraska's chances to land him, and I guess we'll throw McCullough in there too, just because he announced a little bit ago, he's going to commit tomorrow. But about these two in particular, and then anybody else that we should be watching for.
Yeah, Dasan McCullough is a 2022 outside linebacker that reminds me a heck of a lot of the kid that just went to Clemson, whose name I just blanked on, from Kansas, that just went into the NFL. He's a heck of a player. Yeah, it does seem like Ohio State at this point, but Nebraska really likes him, so they'll stay on him. As far as Thomas Fedoni goes, I like where Nebraska is with Fedoni. I think that of all of the cases out there of different recruits on how, having the dead period and not getting guys on campus could hurt Nebraska, Fedoni, it actually works in the opposite direction, because they've had him on campus so often and he's nearby and has such a good relationship with not only the coaches but the players on the team and the players in the recruiting class. The other two guys, though, ironically enough, are tight ends that I have my eye on. James Carney out in Norris, who does not hold an offer yet, but it feels like Nebraska is close. And then if they do offer him, I think he ends up in the class. And then A.J. Rollins from Creighton Prep out in Omaha, he's another guy that I have an eye on that I think will need to make a decision sooner than later and kind of has Nebraska in his top two along with Missouri. Those are a couple of guys that I'm looking at because Nebraska has a real good shot to come away with a nice tight end class this cycle.
I was going to let you go on that last one. I'm going to steal a little bit more of your time here. Last question, I promise. That kind of leads me to believe, you mentioned the two guys here in the state, with some districts canceling football and putting some prospects in a tough situation on what's a really, really good couple of years with Nebraska football recruiting. What have you heard from some local coaches about what this does to their recruitment and what that can mean for their futures?
Yeah, it's good. It will be great for recruitments if they can end up if they can make it through and play. It was really tough leading into this where they didn't have camps and they weren't able to be seen because there ended up being so many kids. And it's not even just like Nebraska recruiting by coming to the Huskers. It's all the surrounding smaller schools. It's other opportunities as well. So that ended up being really tough. So by losing that, you really do lose out. So if Nebraska kids can get a season under their belts, especially those seniors, that can do nothing but help them a lot. And there are a lot of coaches and parents and prospects that are concerned about that. So hopefully they're able to get their seasons in to kind of help themselves.
Greg Smith, Hail Varsity, talking recruiting with us here on Sports Nightly. Greg, thanks so much for the update. Great stuff. Look forward to talking again. Stay safe, my friend. Appreciate you jumping on with us tonight.
Hey, you too, man. Have a great week.
Thank you. Greg Smith, Hail Varsity. Great stuff, as always, with this here on our Woodhouse Auto Family Hotline, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. We'll recap what Greg had to say. We got more Sports Nightly after the break.
531-500-4686, the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question, or you can shoot us a text on that same number, 531-500-4686. Thanks again to Greg Smith from Hail Varsity. How do you feel about this class? 14 guys before high school football gets going. How do you feel like where the Huskers sit?
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about it right now. Obviously, you never want to have decommits. I think that's, priority one. You keep the guys that you have committed on your roster, but I feel like that's becoming increasingly difficult, especially the situation that Nebraska's in right now with not playing. But you look at some of the guys on the list. I love what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball. You're bringing in some of these big-bodied wide receivers. We talked about Grimes already. Latrell Neville, who was a highly thought of commit out of Texas after he decommitted from Virginia Tech, and hearing Sean Hardy's coach talk about his ability gets me really excited for him coming in from Georgia, and his fellow mate from Georgia, Gabe Ervin, gave me a little bit of a deep breath, relaxed moment as he said he's unfazed by Nebraska not playing this fall season. He came out with those comments this last weekend. So you see Branson Yeager constantly tweet out Go Big Red stuff. Obviously, Heinrich Harburg from Kearney is doing his best. Henry Letofsky from Iowa. Those guys, based on their Twitter feeds, Teddy Prozaczki even, you can throw him in the mix. Guys that are very calm, very poised, very I guess, for lack of a better word. That makes me feel good about that, but you just don't know, Greg. You don't know what's going on in these guys' minds. You don't know what other coaches are telling them, and not necessarily with the guys that Nebraska has committed, but some of these players that Nebraska has in their Final Four or their Final Eight or whatever. I feel like that's going to be, fair or not, a challenge that this coaching staff is going to have to deal with. But one thing's for sure, I have a lot of trust in Scott Frost, Eric Shenander, a heck of a lot of trust in Ryan Held. Travis Fisher's killed it. Tony Tuioti has pulled his weight. Up and down this staff, I feel confident in their ability to get kids to be interested in Nebraska and seal the deal. They're not going to get all of them. They're not going to get all their targets, just the way that it is, but the academics, the environment, what they have going here. Zach Duvall in the weight room, he's also a huge recruiter for this staff. With his ability to change bodies, all of that stuff, I feel like plays a factor. And for that reason, I think Nebraska is going to pique interest of kids. And we'll just be interesting to see how this moves and what type of changes there are within Nebraska's class and with other classes around the league with the news that was dropped here recently.
The two decommitments over the last 6 weeks have both been linebackers, but there's still linebackers in the class, and so I think that will still be an area. I don't think this class gets much over 20, particularly with where the eligibility issues are going to be with this team after this canceled season. So sitting at 14, I think that's a pretty good spot for Nebraska to be in here in August. Obviously, you're going to add 4 or 5 more. You hope you don't lose any more. Add 4 or 5 more, and you're probably in good shape for that December signing period. So I'm with you. I like where they sit. I think this is the makings of a really good class. All right, let's head to the phone. Let's go to Akanto and John. Good evening, John. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Good evening. I just want to comment on this controversy of the having the season or not having it. I think, in my opinion, you guys are missing the point. I don't think it has anything to do with the medical aspects of what these kids might get or not get. We've already had hundreds of college players around the country test positive for COVID. I haven't heard of a single death. I haven't even heard of any hospitalizations. I think if you'll never get the league office to admit this in any sort of statement, but I think it comes down to one thing, and that's lawyers. I think if you were to pass a law that says schools can't be held liable if one or several players get this virus, I think you would see a whole different attitude. But I think what's going on in the back room, especially with these college presidents, is they don't want to subject their schools to multi-million-dollar lawsuits if some kids should happen to get the virus and should happen to end up on a ventilator and should happen to, God forbid, die. They're not going to say it publicly, but I'll bet you that's what's going on in the background.
Could be right.
I'll hang up, Mr.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. You could be right. And that was kind of the point of a lot of these parents' letters to the Big Ten. They said, we are ready to sign whatever we sign to clear everybody of responsibility. And that's what the parents said. If you'd have brought us, said, we need you to do this, there were enough of us that would have done it to do that. And the kids who don't feel comfortable, or their parents who don't feel comfortable with their kids doing it, could have opted out and not had couldn't have been penalized, wouldn't lose their scholarship at all. So, John, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's absolutely a big part of this is a liability issue with these universities and schools. I don't think there's any question, Ben, that that's part of it.
No, John, I definitely think you're onto something, but I also think it all kind of ties together, too. I mean, I think it's easy to hide behind the health and safety aspect of it, and I think that's going to be what's talked about publicly because it's not as controversial as your take. But Greg, we've also seen what some time away can do. When Kevin Warren was put on blast by Dave Revson, he didn't have a lot to say, but after he had some time to kind of maybe get advice or bend the ear of some people, that's when he said the whole thing about Nebraska not they can't, if they want to be a part of the conference, they can't play these games. And so you saw what the element of time does to responses as well. So maybe he said it because it was a public thing. Maybe he said it because there wasn't all these people watching him on TV on his own network. I don't know why his stance changed so drastically when he was pressed on that issue 2 times by Dave Revson, but he had no problem sharing that information. I think it was to Yahoo Sports several hours later. So I think lawyers, especially in Chicago, especially in the Big Ten, there's a lot of schools that have great prestigious law schools. I don't know that it's necessarily a coincidence, and I do think there's probably some validity to what you are saying.
In baseball terminology, the commissioner was in an 0-2 hole. He swung and missed twice.
He had the back foot slider coming his way.
Yeah. Yes, he did. 531-500-4686. That's the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question or shoot us a text on our U.S. Cellular text line. Back with final segment of Hour 1 next. 531-500-4686. The number if you want to dial us up with a comment or a question on our text line. This one's for you, Ben. Shiro in Adams County. I don't understand how these recruits can commit and then decommit. Is there a timeline they have to do this?
Yeah, up until signing day, they can commit and decommit as many times as they want. The best is when you get the situations where a kid commits to a school, decommits to that school, commits somewhere else, decommits there, then commits back to the school he originally committed. I mean, I've seen that a handful of times. And
who was that running back out of Tennessee?
He was from Texas. Kendall Bussey, I think, was his name. He committed to about every school there was in the country, Nebraska being one of them.
I think he ended up at A&M.
I think he did. But he was committed to them prior. He committed to Nebraska, committed at A&M. Then he went and played for Tennessee. And then he ended up back at A&M. And I don't know. Yeah, that recruitment was an utter nightmare. And there are some stories out there that are pretty similar to that. The amount of commits, and the best is when I think he's still at USC, where he originally committed to USC, decommitted from USC, committed to Texas, signed with Texas, went to Texas's campus, and then like after a week, decommitted or he asked for his release and then went to USC. Like all with like he went there for school and everything, and then all of a sudden packed up and went back to USC. Yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah. All right, here's the Week 1 SEC schedule. Came out a couple of hours ago. This will be on September the 26th when they're going to begin their year. Again, they're going 10 conference games only. Here's your Week 1 schedule. Alabama at Missouri, Florida at Ole Miss, Georgia at Arkansas, Kentucky at Auburn, Mississippi State at LSU. That could be okay. The Pirate at LSU to Week 1. Tennessee at South Carolina. That could be a pretty close game. Vandy at A&M. So not a lot of great ones in there.
You got, let's see, you got Lane Kiffin against the Gators, right?
Yeah, yep.
And then there was another one in there that was, Kentucky. The Kentucky-Auburn game might be interesting.
Yeah. That could be pretty good. So there's your Week 1. That's what they released today. They put out the rest of their schedule, but there's their Week 1 matchups in the SEC, slated again for September 26th. Got just under 2 minutes left in the hour. Let's go back to the phone. Let's go clear out to Sydney and Sue. Good evening, Sue. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Thank you. My question is, have the boys as well as the athletic department and the coaches discussed the idea of the possibility of exhibition games?
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Appreciate the call. Really, there's one big snag holding that up, and until the league lets them put on pads, there's not going to be any sort of spring game exhibition. I mean, I suppose they could do some 7-on-7 drills, but right now there's a league-wide mandate that you can't practice with pads on, and so they would have no way to prepare for that.
We've had that question a lot about can we do a fall game, not a spring game, but a fall game, just an inter-squad game, and let people come in and watch the Huskers. They'd love to, but they can't because of the mandate that you can't put pads on, and I don't see that being lifted by the Big Ten Conference. So it's a great idea, Sue, and I think a lot of people would love that if they could do something, but they're hand-tied by the league. Sue dialed us up on our Sports Nightly hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Good hour. Hour 1 in the books. Thanks again to Greg Smith from Hale Varsity for spending some time and shedding some light on the recent recruiting news for the Cornhuskers. Next hour, Jeremiah Searles, former Husker, member of our team here at Husker Sports, will join us to get his take on all the latest that's been happening around this crazy situation around college football. That's on the other side.
Good evening, I'm Tim Curran. Starting off with some Major League Baseball scores. No score between the Blue Jays and the Orioles in the bottom of the second. Also in progress, Yankees right now lead their rival, the Red Sox, 3-0 in the bottom of the third. In the top of the third, it's the Nationals with the 2-run lead over the Braves, 4-2 the score in that one. Other score in progress, Mets lead over the Marlins 3-1 in the top of the second. And one final from earlier today was the Cardinals, who took on the Cubs 3-1 in 7 innings for Game 1 of their doubleheader. Moving on to NBA playoff action, it's the Celtics with the 67-59 lead over the 76ers right now, with just under 7 minutes to go there in the third quarter. And some finals from earlier today. Nuggets took down the Jazz 135-125 in overtime, and it was the Raptors who were victorious over the Nets 134-110. And in NHL playoff action, the Avalanche enjoy a healthy lead over the Coyotes right now, 6-1 the score there, with just under 6 minutes to go in the third period. And it's the Lightning who lead it over the Blue Jackets 2-1. Or rather, that was a final from earlier today, with the Lightning taking down the Blue Jackets 2-1. And Tampa Bay leads that series now 3-1. Live inside the Husker Sports Network studios, Adam Curran.
Your state, your team, your show. This is Sports Nightly.
Adrian gets the snap, holds it, looks, sets, throws, pass caught, Wanya, first down. It's on the 20, 15, shoots a defender, 10, 5, touchdown, Nebraska. Wandale Robinson's first touchdown as a Cornhusker.
Now, let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Ben McLaughlin.
Yeah, we are. Monday night, Sports Nightly here on the Husker Sports Network. Hope you had a great weekend. Big hour coming up. Jeremiah Searle's going to be here in just a couple of minutes. Former Husker, member of our team here at Husker Sports. Get his take on the craziness of the last couple of weeks for Big Ten football. Scott Docterman of The Athletic will be here. He's been covering the Iowa part of this story. They were the first parent group to get together and hand-deliver a letter to the league office. We'll get his thoughts about all this. And we'll keep some lines open for you to join us as well at 531-500-4686. You can also fire us a text on that same number on our U.S. Cellular text line, the official wireless provider of the Huskers at 531-500-4686. In fact, let's start the hour with a call. Let's run up to Omaha and Sean. Good evening, Sean. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Hey, yeah, I'm a little concerned. These kids are all competitive. For one, you still got rec sports coming on. You know, for the all the dorms are still having their flag football teams for each floor. These guys are going to play in those, risking themselves to injury with kids that aren't tested and letting them play.
Isn't that crazy that they're going to let intramurals go on campus and yet the
intramural rec sports with coming from all over without being tested? And you know that some of these guys, kids that are freshmen or maybe a red shirt on any one of the sports teams is going to play volleyball or basketball or flag football.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All
right, Sean, appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things like this. I talked to a guy over the weekend that knows somebody that plays in the AAU circuit, and he goes, they had their full schedule all summer. They had teams flying around the country, staying in hotels, playing games in big gyms with fans all around the place. You had baseball leagues, even collegiate leagues that took place all summer long, and they played. Soccer has been going on around the country, and in fact, I was driving in East Lincoln late last night, and the YMCA fields out there were packed with soccer kids playing right now. And that's what's so hard for a college player in the Big Ten right now to go, wait a minute, all these other things are going on, and yet you're telling me I can't play. It's hard. It's really hard. One guy that might have some answers for us joins us now, and that's Jeremiah Searles, former Husker, now a retired NFL player. Jeremiah, how do you compartmentalize the last week or so?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was such, when you can even rewind it almost like 10 days when the schedule came out and how much optimism and how much hope there was. It's like, oh, man, this is really going to happen. And then 4 days later, it's like, just kidding. And, I mean, I went through the emotional stages where I think on Wednesday I ate my way through my feelings, had some ice cream cake, and was just angry. And then Thursday, Friday turned to pure anger and like, okay, who can I blame? Who can I yell at? And it's just this weird thing because nobody knows anything. Everyone just kind of points to everyone else and is like, all we know is we're not having a season. But then you ask the wonderful question of why, and no one has a very good answer. And I think it's getting harder and harder to swallow, and more people are stepping up to bat to want more answers. But, I mean, I've just been kind of sitting here going from not just like anger from a fandom, but a lot of just disappointment for the players too.
What do you think's going through their mind? They have to be a little lost right now, aren't they?
I couldn't imagine. I mean, someone asked me, I was doing a podcast, and someone asked me, like, hey, take yourself back to August 2013. You're gearing up for your senior year, and this happens. Like, what do you do? And, like, you start trying to think of all the threads that need to unravel of, well, do I want to go to the NFL? Do I want to play in the spring? Can I even play in the spring? Will there be a spring? I mean, there's just so much going on, and you've worked so hard. I mean, especially for these seniors that have been through a lot, going into year 3 at Frost system. They've been through a couple head coaches. And, I mean, it's just one of those things that as you really start to look at it, like, this has such a broader impact and such a bigger scale that as a player, you just sit at home and you wake up every day and you check Twitter as to what's new. And I mean, that's about all you can do. You can control what you can control to an extent, but when you're just sitting there at the mercy of someone else, knowing you didn't even have a dog in this fight because you didn't have a choice to put your voice out there, I think that would be the more frustrating piece to it all.
Well, this weekend the big movement was by the players. I think it started at Iowa, and then Ohio State's parents, and Nebraska then jumped on board as well. And good for them, right? I mean, good for them to stand up for their kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think Iowa has the best argument, right? They're like, hey, we live here in Iowa City, and we're not allowed to play football, but Iowa State in Ames is somehow safe. So I mean, they have a great argument. I think it's great the parents are backing their players. I retweeted something the other day that's like someone was talking about how these 18 to 22-year-old kids can't make these type of decisions for themselves and sign these waivers. I was like, oh, wait, so they can vote for who's going to be the president of our country. They can vote for local leadership, and they can go to war and die for this country, but they can't sign a waiver saying I don't want to catch a COVID or not catch COVID. I want to play football. It just doesn't make a lot. There seems like there's a lot of hypocrisy in those decisions, but I think that the ability to have parents step up, players step up and say, hey, we want to play, we want a voice, and we demand answers. I mean, now whether they get those answers or not, who knows? But I think the fact that they're willing to step up and fight for it shows a lot of guts about who we are and who we're built, especially at those schools like Nebraska, Iowa, Ohio State.
Well, we don't know if we're going to get a response from the commissioner of the Big Ten. I think we should. We should get one. And what would you want to hear? What would you want to hear the commissioner come out and say now?
I want to hear him say what happened in those 4 days. What all of a sudden just completely changed? What made you completely, the parents ask it in the Nebraska letter, what corresponded in those 4 days from schedule release, we're having a season, to just complete plug pull? No postponement, no, hey, we're going to push season back a couple weeks. What new information with the disease and a virus that we've been dealing with since March came out in those 4 days that said, nope, not feasible, not able to do it? What went on? And if he has a good answer for that, cool. But if he doesn't, I really want to know, okay, then what went into your decision process and why? But and what sucks, Greg, is we don't have any leverage of making him answer that for us.
Yeah.
He can literally just be like, I said no. And we'd have to deal with that, and we have to live with that. And I think that really sucks, but that's just kind of part of it. And everyone's saying, well, maybe he'll go back and reopen football season. First-year commissioner, not going to look weak and overturn his first major decision. I don't care if it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I can't see him now all of a sudden coming back and be like, you know what? I was wrong, and we're going to play this year.
No, yeah, I don't think that happens at all. And I've had people ask me in the last 24 hours. I'm like, no, don't be getting your hopes up. It's not going to happen. How about he has a son who is a third-year player at Mississippi State. They are still a go for their season. His son can't play, can he? I mean, what would the optics of that be like?
I mean, all I know is I better not see him at a game. That would make me real upset if Kevin Warren's standing sideline on a game. And here's the thing, I know Kevin Warren. He sat in front of me for 3 years on the airplane when I was with the Minnesota Vikings. He was the VP of operations, and he sat right in front of me. Mr. Warren, hi, how are you? I know him very well. And it's frustrating for me that I want to call him and be like, what are we doing? But not my place. But yeah, I mean, his son can't play. And I hate that for his son. I don't even hate that for Kevin. I hate that for his son. His son should be able to play. Every student athlete should be able to play this year, if they have the right and they want to. And they sign the waiver, they understand the risks, and they're willing to take the chance. And I think that should be every right. That should be every opportunity for, not just sports, but all across the board, if you really want to even go that far. But for sports specifically, I think that's what we need to do, and we need to allow people to make their own decisions.
Again, visiting with Jeremiah Searles here on Sports 90 on the Husker Sports Network. I think they're still in a fog, Jeremiah, in North Stadium, not quite sure what to do. They have the ability to continue to work 20 hours a week with the student-athletes. I know school began today, so they probably want the kids just to kind of get acclimated to school, and I think it's all online this week on campus. But what should they do in the next month or so? Should they do workouts? Should they back off? Nobody knows what to do because this is uncharted territory. What would you like them to do?
I think Duval and Scott need to sit down and put an end goal on like, okay, what do we want to accomplish here these next few weeks? Do we want to practice? Do we want to get bigger, faster, stronger? Do we want a combination of the two? And how do they blend together? Because every strength coach in America right now is like, cool, great, get them in the weight room. We're going to start lifting. And every coach is like, well, we can have them on the field, so we want to get some work in because we didn't have a spring, we didn't have a camp. Like, so I think that there's a perfect blend of the two that can happen. I think Scott and Zach will sit down and say, okay, maybe we're going to practice 3 days this week, we're going to lift 2, and then next week we're going to lift 3 and practice 2, or whatever it might be as far as what you can do on and off the field within the laws. But I think you need to find a way to just continue to get better as a team. Nebraska's got a long way to go. We were by no shape or form are we supposed to be the front runners in the Big Ten this year, and so we know that. Everyone knows that, and we got a lot of work to do for it.
All right, I'm going to turn the spotlight on you. How are you handling the fact that you're not at a camp right now? This is the first fall you haven't been in an NFL camp. They're open now. They started pads, a lot of it around the league today. How you holding up? Are you having some withdrawal?
Little bit. The first few weeks when everyone was reporting to camp was tough. Seeing like the pictures post up and everyone pop up, and you're like, man, like this is just weird. It's just weird. Like spending a birthday by myself in Nebraska, like is the first time I've done that since I was like 16. I've always been in a camp. And so it's been weird, but I'll tell you this, I was watching them hit today, and I was like, don't really miss that. Like, don't really miss the one-on-one ram drills and the one-on-one pass rush drills. And, I mean, you miss it, but, like, your body's like, man, I don't miss that at all because of the wear and tear that it puts on your body. I mean, Spencer Long just retired because of that reason. And, I mean, we have a lot of guys in my class that are coming to the end of their careers. And it's crazy, it's sad, but it's part of the life in the NFL. But it's been good to be home. Good to spend time with the little man, good to spend time with the wife, and hopefully get a chance to debate Desmond Howard at some point in time because I am coming for his head.
Pros and cons of no preseason game, what would they be?
Pros, if you're a 5-year-plus vet, you are never happier, man. You know you're in the two deep. You're singing from the rooftops. Cons, if you're a first, second, third year undrafted free agent rookie, you are crying and dying inside because you have no chance of making that football team. And as terrible as that is to say, if you can't show that you can do it in live reps in a game, no other 31 other teams aren't going to take the chance on you. And that's what really sucks for these guys that won't have these opportunities to go out there and perform for the other 31 other teams. Yeah, like they're going to have 16 practice squad spots this year, which is nice. You'll get some more guys that stick around. But you see 5-6 guys from each team that are undrafted free agent rookies that go out and ball in the preseason and get picked up on active rosters all across the league. And you're just not going to see that this year. And you're going to see just a record number of undrafted free agent rookies get cut. First of all, they only signed 44% of usual undrafted free agent rookies this year because of everything. And I mean, you're going to see majority of those guys get released because there's no time to really trust that they'll be able to do it. You're going to bring in veterans. Like, I mean, if I was on the street, you'd bring a veteran in myself playing experience over a rookie because you know he can do it versus the chance and the gamble on a rookie.
All right, I need your help I need help. I'm not sure how I feel about this, Jeremiah.
Okay.
Whether I want to see those other power leagues play football this fall or not. Part of me wants to see them play to kind of prove the Big Ten wrong, but the other part of me is like, I don't think that's good for Nebraska if those people play. I'm really torn on this deal.
I'm with you, man. It's like I want college football. I would much rather watch college football than NFL football any day of the week. I think it's more exciting. I think it's more different to watch. I mean, it's not as quite as talented, but it's so fun to watch. And so I don't want to lose that completely, but at the same time, I know I'll have this dying inside bitterness as I watch them, knowing that Memorial Stadium's sitting empty on a Saturday in September. And so it's a weird thing. And there's part of me that hopes that it goes off and those 3 leagues go and then everyone looks at the Big Ten like, hey, dum-dums, what are we doing? But then there's another piece that wants it to not even go because if it does go and then falls apart of the seams and the Big Ten can stand there and pound their chest a little bit, I don't want that either.
You're in the same boat I am. I'm just torn. Part of me is like, yeah, I could like that, but I won't like this. So, well, it's crazy. All of it's crazy. We appreciate you always sounding off with us. We'll keep in touch. As we know, the NFL is going to get going. I don't have any qualms about that. They're going to play. We'll just see what happens in college. Thank you, my friend. Have a good week.
Absolutely, guys. Appreciate it. Go Big Red.
There's Jeremiah Searles joining us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. When we come back, Scott Docterman of The Athletic will join us. We'll hear about how Iowa's parents have kind of led the charge to get some other parents around the Big Ten Conference fired up and asking some questions of the Big Ten. We'll hear that side of it next. Welcome back, Sports Nightly Monday night here on the Husker Sports Network. Greg Sharp with you. Again, I hope everybody had a good weekend. Just a couple of more summer weekends left. We're not that far away from Labor Day, which should have been the start of Big Ten football, but that's not going to happen. And one guy that will now have some free time in the fall joins us now, Scott Docterman of The Athletic. Good evening, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Greg, or as I guess as good as can be expected. That's that force of habit. How are you?
Well, I'm my head's spinning. It's been such a wild couple of weeks. I mean, obviously this didn't play real well in Iowa City as the Hawkeye parents were quickly organizing and getting their letter dropped off at the Big Ten office. What is the temperature about all of this around the Hawkeye program right now?
Yeah, they're pretty close to being ready to storm the offices in Rosemont, Illinois. So, I mean, I think there's some solidarity there between the Iowa faithful and the Nebraska faithful, maybe for the first and only time in history. But right now the parents have really organized. I talked to one today, and it got up to 200 on a Zoom call, really calling for the Big Ten to try to find some way for the Big Ten to save face and for them also to restore the fall season. And some of that's by the new saliva testing. Some of it is, maybe forcing the athletes to do remote schooling. I mean, I think it's all a pipe dream, but everybody here is just devastated. And I know it's exactly the same way in Lincoln and Omaha. So I guess we're all going to be miserable together, I suppose.
Scott, one of the reputations of the Big Ten Conference for years and years and decades is that they always seem to march to one beat of a drum and don't get out of line at all. Well, this seems really contrary to all of that. How did we get to this point in your eyes?
Yeah, there was a lot of division around this decision, and that hasn't really happened before, as you mentioned. I mean, usually there have been a lot of disagreements, don't get me wrong, in the past, but they've all got to a common ground. And I mean, maybe this is a time that everybody should look back at the brilliance that was Jim Delaney and being able to get presidents who are very powerful people and headstrong people to all get on the same page and look in one direction and then kind of get everyone else to follow. And Kevin Warren doesn't have that kind of cachet. And when you have this kind of division, that this is something that Delaney would have normally smoothed out. He would have pushed down the road to try to build some sort of consensus. Well, they made such a quick decision that it didn't play out very well. I mean, when you see, I kind of characterize this as the 5 groups of parents that are going after the Big Ten kind of come from the 5 places where football is almost a religion. The other 9 places, it's just really, really important. So, right now you're looking at kind of this division, and I'm not sure. I don't know if Kevin Warren's the right guy to heal it because he lost a lot of equity based on this decision. So this is going to be something that sticks with the Big Ten for a while, and it's in a place we've never seen it before.
How did his responses to Dave Revson's questions after the announcement play in and around Iowa City?
The exact same way they played in Lincoln. My phone was beeping and going crazy for people just because they could not believe what they were hearing. I mean, the lack of specifics, every phrase had the word uncertainty in it. Well, everybody knows this whole thing's an uncertainty. It's been an uncertainty since really late February. But what changed in the last 6 days, from when a schedule was unveiled and everybody was kind of going, okay, we got something. Maybe we can look forward to something. And then 6 days later, it's gone. All hope is gone. And none of those responses came forward, and everybody was put in the same position of what happened. And he didn't answer any of those questions and really has not since then. So he needs to come forward. I chatted a little bit with somebody from the Big Ten today who said, that there probably will be a response based on the parents. But I think this is something that I don't know, he may survive in his job, but I don't know that his stature is going to survive this kind of a blow.
Yeah, it seems to me that's going to be tough he can get the next 15, 20 things right, but people are always going to remember this because this is going to be talked about for years and decades to come. Again, we're visiting with Scott Docterman of The Athletic. Who are the organizers of the parent letter? Do you know how that got started?
Yeah, I talked to a few of them recently, and two that really were at the forefront is Jack Kerner's dad, Gary. Jack's a safety at Iowa. Gary, they live in the West Des Moines area, and Mark Kallenberger, who is from Bettendorf, Iowa, on the eastern side. His dad, Jay. They were among the forerunners where the first night, right after all that was released, they got on a Zoom call, and there were 11 of them. And they were just kind of, I think everybody was just talking things out. They really didn't know where anything was going to go. And then, everything picked up steam within a couple of days, and they really felt strongly about how wrong this was in their eyes and how they needed to give them a chance to play. And then that's when the letters all came about. And, of course, the long snappers' parents went to Rosemont, Illinois to drop off the letters. So it transpired over about a 2 to 3 day period. And now they feel like their first phase of just gaining spreading their word is kind of phased out, and now they want the second one, which is to get fall football. I don't think that's realistic, but I think that if we can have even a sliver of hope, 0.0001% chances, we'll take it right now.
Yeah, I got asked that a bunch over the weekend, and I'm with you. I don't see them reversing course that much to allow people to play games. I know the Husker staff is kind of in a fog right now. I'm not sure they quite know where to go from here. What about Kirk Ferentz? Have they laid out a plan for their team over the coming weeks? Are they going to continue to work out? Do you have any idea what they're planning on doing in the next 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, Kirk, when I talked to him just after this all went down, and he pretty much just told the players, scatter till the first day of school, and then we'll figure something out after that, which, planning, training, because unless they get called back and say tomorrow there's an about face from Rosemont, and I don't see that happening, but if they call them back, then, yeah, they'll all come and play. But he just wanted them to get it out of, get away, get it out of their system, and then come back. But, this has been tough. Talking to Gary Barta, the athletic director, I mean, they're looking at a, $75 million shortfall. Now, if they could play in the spring, that'll erase a lot of that. But until they do that, it's, they're going to have to do layoffs, furloughs, maybe suspensions or eliminations of sports. I mean, and the football programs are the same boat. I mean, for, who knows, they may even have coaches furloughed in the fall, until the speeds up, because this is just such a economic downer for everybody. And then, just like in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Iowa, in Iowa City, all of the businesses, the hotels, the restaurants. This is just an absolute killer of a year. And I think everybody has come to the same conclusion. And I know Kirk Ferentz brought it up last week, which is, I thought they were going to delay it, push it back, and to have it outright canceled was just very difficult for them to accept, and certainly that was the case in 5 different communities.
I was with him. That's exactly what I thought they were going to do, is push it back maybe to the 26th, late September, like the SEC is doing, and see what it looks like then. And I'm in agreement with you, Scott. I think the dark shadow of this hasn't even begun to be cast. I think that's going to happen in the coming weeks. The one thing that the Hawkeyes have to deal with that the Huskers don't is you have another Division I program within the borders of that state, and Iowa State, who as of right now is set to play. I mean, that's if they play and they kick off games here in a couple of weeks, that's going to be a real tough pill to swallow, I would think, for the Hawkeye program.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fans here are just, it's still, they're kind of in a fog, but if they're looking at September 12th, and that's the day they normally would play Iowa State, and Iowa State's playing Louisiana on television, and nobody's at Kinnick, there's no Kinnick wave, there's no Kinnick speech, there's nothing like that, it'll kill them. It really will. And I think it'll be similar for Nebraska to watch, your old Big 8 rivals, Kansas State, Iowa State, and, Mizzou in the SEC conference, playing, and you're not. I mean, it's going to be a surreal feeling. And I wrote about this on Sunday, just my day, covering Iowa football from basically the moment I leave the house to when I get home, and all the little funny things and odd things that you go through. This hasn't hit us yet. But I guarantee when we get to September and then we get to that first crisp day in October and we wake up and the sun's shining and there's no, in your case, Husker football, no Hawkeye football, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt really bad for a lot of people. And I think that the Big Ten made a huge mistake by not just pushing it out. I mean, even if we wouldn't have came to that conclusion, that's okay. But I just think that right now jumping the gun is going to do irreparable damage to the league, to Kevin Warren's legacy, and to these communities.
Well, I think you're probably right. You know, the one thing college football doesn't have, and they don't have a commissioner, and maybe this can push to that at some point in time. Let me jump ahead a few months with you, and let's speculate a little about college basketball. They are under the umbrella of the NCAA. Mark Emmert will have the ultimate call on whether college basketball happens. What's your confidence level that we'll see some hoops sometime in this academic calendar year?
Yeah, I think we will. And the reason is I think it's easier with basketball with fewer players. When I think the majority of schools are going to go virtual, right around Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving. So a lot of these athletes you could sequester them. You could get 8 teams together in, let's say, Des Moines or Omaha and play at a Creighton or play at Drake or Wells Fargo Arena, and you can kind of just put them in a hotel, put them in dorms that are disinfected, for a week. You can put 6 or 7 teams together, or games together with those teams, and have them play for a full week straight. And during the day, you could just take your online classes. I think that's pretty easy. Obviously, you can't play more than one football game a week, let alone more than one. So I think that's what advantage they have. They'll probably be able to do that. They'll look to the NBA for what they went through, and if they do that a couple of times during the winter before the second semester starts, maybe they have a chance then to go on campus. But I do think they'll get some semblance of a season together.
Well, I hope you're right. One last thing for you, Scott. What's the status of high school football in the state here in Nebraska? They're going to give it a go, except for the Omaha district. They've opted out, but everybody else is going to give it a go. What about in the state of Iowa?
Yeah, they're going to play. They had kind of this odd scenario where it's 5. You could play 5 games up to 7, and then everybody makes the playoffs. So there's not the normal district 9-game season where you play a few games in district and then out of district, and there's a qualification. Everybody's going to make the state playoffs, and it's been kind of odd because a couple of high-profile players that have committed, one to Iowa, one to Kansas State, they're moving to the state to compete. So I think you might see a few more of those. Wanting to get in a senior year in an area where they're playing in the spring. So they're going to give it a go. They played high school baseball and softball during the summer, so they do have a little bit of a test run. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this holds up.
And if that goes and the Cyclones go, my goodness, I just can't imagine the temper of people going to be around Big Ten country. Scott, great stuff as always. Thank you so much. Stay healthy, and let's chat soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Greg. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Scott Docterman of The Athletic with us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. All right, phone lines back open for you. 531-500-4686. If you have some thoughts about what Scott had to say, what Jeremiah had to say earlier on in the hour, if you don't want to can't get to a phone and call us up, but you wanted to shoot us a text, that's our text line as well, 531-500-4686. Ben will rejoin me next. The number if you want to dial us up with a comment or a question. Real interesting conversation there with Scott Docterman of The Athletic, who covers the Iowa Hawkeyes, about that state. And the Cyclones are playing, at least as of right now. You've got high school football going, maybe a little bit of a reduced schedule, and then no Iowa Hawkeye football. I mean, to me, that's worse than our situation, because they have another Division I program in their state that, as of right now, is going to play. I mean, that's going to be heartbreaking if they wake up September the 12th and they're the Cyclones taking the field at Jack Trice.
Yeah, I'm imagining how frustrating that would be, to just have your rival be able to play and you're not. I mean, that would add a significant amount of frustration to my level if that was the case. I mean, it's even, it's frustrating enough just having different leagues play, let alone, a rival and somebody that you play against every year and somebody that's so close to your campus. Man, I understand it. Iowa's parents voiced their frustration, and some of the administration, the coaches have voiced their frustration, but it makes sense, and yeah, that's a tough deal.
Jeremiah Searles was our first guest this hour, and he dropped the news that Spencer Long has officially retired from the National Football League. Spencer was released about a month ago from Buffalo. I believe he signed with the 49ers, but has now opted to just retire. Spencer, I believe either he took the MCATs or was going to. Coming out of college, he's going to be just fine. He's going to be just fine with whatever he does. What a great guy, and what a nice NFL career, like Jeremiah, that Spencer Long had.
Yeah, Spencer's one that, I mean, the Longs, period, are going to be ones that you remember for a long time because, I mean, they're the ones that had the ultimate Husker path, right? From walk-on to starter to NFL player. I mean, that's living the ultimate dream, to go from walking on at Nebraska to becoming a starter to becoming one of the best linemen on the team and even in the conference, and then, you know, taking a shot at the NFL. He is a part of that elite group, and we ought to come up with a name of that group of linemen that weren't really highly thought of when they were here, but went on to just have so much success in the next level. And you know, we've said this a lot when we talk about Brent Qualla and even Jeremiah himself, Cole Pensick, you know, obviously Spencer Long and Nick Gates. You know, these are guys that you know, we didn't necessarily appreciate while they were here, and you know, give them the kudos that they deserve, because they all turned out to be awesome players, great NFL players, and set themselves up for a lot of success in their life. I know they're linemen. They don't get as much love as Amir Abdullah or Taylor Martinez or Tommy Armstrong or Kenny Bell, but they're just as important, and those guys had great careers, and Spencer's one of them.
You know, he's and Spencer's just one of those great stories where he was a walk-on, came to Nebraska, did such a great job there, great student, and certainly wish him nothing but the best as he moves on forward. Major League Baseball, the Cardinals are back. Ben, how about that? Finally, we could see the Cardinals play some baseball.
Yeah, 5 games entering the weekend. It's just crazy. They were able to have that series over the weekend, but yeah, getting back in action is great for them. Obviously, the White Sox is a tough opponent to draw. They're playing good baseball right now, but obviously back in the division today with a doubleheader with the Cubs. A little interesting doubleheader. They're technically the home team, even though they're playing in Wrigley Field in Game 2. We've seen that a couple of different times this year with different teams, but yeah, it's an interesting makeup, an interesting group. They just called up Dylan Carlson, who's their number 1 prospect. He had his first Major League action this weekend, and yeah, we'll see what the Cardinals have left in the tank. It's quite the mix of young and old on that roster, that's for sure.
That leads me into a little Husker-related baseball topic. Sean Callahan of Rivals was out at Haymarket Park over the weekend. There was a wing fest out there, and I think he was one of the judges of that. He went down near the field and took pictures. And, man, it looked a little rough, Ben. I mean, there was weeds growing up through the track portion of the ballpark. Kind of made me sad seeing the field in that. You know, the Salt Dogs did not play this year. The Huskers obviously shut her down March 9th or 10th as their last home game. It was kind of sad seeing the park look that way.
Yeah, rough shape. Man, we've seen it in some pretty rough conditions over the past, right? That series with Purdue, the thing was under 2 feet of water, and there's been snow on the field when we haven't wanted snow on the field, and this arguably hurts the heart worse because, you know, it's just not being used and being taken care of right now. But hopefully soon, I know Jackson Hallmark put out a tweet today. Hopefully soon the boys are back out there and back playing ball, and we're back in our booth at Haymarket Park calling baseball again soon.
I reached out to a couple people today to see if there's going to be fall ball for the Huskers. Nobody really had the answer for that. I would assume if you are allowing the football team to kind of continue workouts and the basketball team can have workouts, I would assume Nebraska would have their fall ball schedule. I don't know why they wouldn't. I'll continue to see. Maybe I'll shoot a text to the head coach and see what he has to say, but I don't know why you couldn't do that here in the fall, but maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of restrictions, guidelines are going to be put in place for fall baseball, but yeah, I mean, it's just too bad. I mean, I was just going back to this last week and listening to old games from, you know, the 2019 half a season, and, you know, the theme through a lot of our broadcasts was we're still learning who these guys are. We're still learning what this team's about. We're still learning, the coaches are still learning about these players. And I feel like when we finally started to get a handle on what the 2019 Huskers were going to look like, that cord got ripped out of the wall. And so, it's almost like you're waiting all movie for the climax to happen. It starts to happen, and then the projector goes out.
Yeah.
And who knows when you get to finish the movie. But hopefully this team's playing again in February. What the schedule looks like, I'm not sure, but I miss it. I know you miss it. I know the boys are really missing it.
We were just getting to kind of figure out kind of the way the coaches think, too. You watch enough of the games as we do, you kind of can read their mind a little bit about, like, okay, he's going to do this in this situation, or he's going to get this guy up in this situation. We were just kind of piecing some of that together when it did get shut down. So it usually takes a full year of kind of observing a coach and a coaching staff to kind of learn their idiosyncrasies and their tendencies a little bit. We didn't have it. We were getting there, but we didn't quite have the handle on that. So we're going to have to take another half year. No clue what's going to happen next spring for Husker baseball. I asked Scott Doctor about the college basketball season, and I think he's right. I think there's a good chance that happens to some form, but I don't know. I just don't know what to expect next spring with college baseball.
Yeah, that's funny to your point. One thing that we got to know pretty well is what type of mood the coaching staff was going to be on after a win or a loss. I think we had a pretty good idea of what to expect temperament-wise and how our conversations were going to go with Coach Erstad and Coach Silva. And we were still learning that. I mean, I remember going down for the first couple of post-game interviews going, I have no idea what to expect from the head coach after a game like this. And, it surprised me. Games I thought he would be upset, he wasn't. Games I thought he'd be fine, he wasn't. And I think that was another thing, too, that we were getting used to is just kind of their perception of the games and how they took them and then showing up at the ballpark the next day, just what their mood and what their temperament is like. That's the fun part of it. And the other fun part of it is we know them. We've been around Will Bolt. We've been around Jeff Christie. And Lance Harvell's as easy a guy as there is to get along with. And, that part was fun. And we're going to get that to a certain extent. I don't think any of us were really used to it in that short amount of time. But hopefully in 2020 we'll get that feeling back.
No doubt. 531-500-4686, the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question, or shoot us a text on that same number, 531-500-4686. More Sports Nightly next. 531-500-4686, the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. Greg Sharp, Ben McLaughlin with you here on a Monday night. Tim Curran in control of this thing from back in our studios. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Bruning and Reese. Good evening, Reese. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Hey, thank you. So I just wanted to comment that I feel like the Big Ten was going to cancel the season all along once they scratched the Iowa State game, but they was going to allow Iowa to go play Rutgers or vice versa, however it was going to be initially, and that the commissioner must have thought he had a big enough hammer to swing once he pulled the pin on the trailer that college football altogether was going to be scrapped, but nothing followed.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to get a sense of what direction they were going to go. I mean, there was silence for so long, and then boom, all of a sudden the schedule's released. Well, I should back up. Before that, we get the conference-only announcement, and you're thinking, okay, well, at least they have the plan, and then, silence, the schedule drops, you're thinking, okay, this thing might happen, and then boom, cord ripped out of the wall, and all of us trying to make sense of the timeline of events. That's the biggest thing, is the timeline is just so fuzzy, and I don't know that it's ever going to clear up, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just, I really believe you go back, the schedule got released on that Wednesday, and then we got all kinds of chatter on Saturday. Remember, it was on Saturday. That was when the coaches got the news, you can't put pads on in your third practice. I think that was a trial balloon by the Big Ten, hoping that the other Power Fives would go, yeah, they're right, let's just go with them. Well, the Pac-12 was ready to jump on board, and the other three go, why? What are you doing? It's August the 8th or whatever it is. What are you doing? There's going to be a lot of things that change in the next 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. And I think they didn't get the response, but then they were already out on that edge of that diving board, and they couldn't turn around and go back. And they may not have had a vote. I mean, we've had two different people. Sandy Barber, the AD at Penn State, and the Minnesota president said, well, there really wasn't a vote. It was just kind of a consensus of the room that, yeah, we need to bang this.
That's the other weird thing, too, is how much the story of this vote has changed. Went from 12-2 to 8-6 to no vote to maybe back 8 to 8-6 to I don't know if there was a vote. Do you know if there was a vote? I don't know. It's like nobody seems to know what the answer to that question even is. I mean, I don't know what's stopping the commissioner from telling us what the vote was. I mean, maybe if it was 8-6, he's scared that that it's too close of a vote. He's going to get even more backlash. I don't know. He's a hard guy to read, and it's a hard situation to kind of hypothesize what happened, because I think you can take it about any direction and piece together some type of logical conclusion. It's just really, really a weird thing.
I don't need to know the vote, and he doesn't need to reveal it, but he should get up in front of a camera and say, wasn't unanimous, I'm not going to share the vote. But
there was one. Was there one?
We had varying opinions of this thing, and then lay out the medical part of it. Here's what we were looking at: this, and this, and we deemed it to be too risky to put our student athletes in harm's way. Lay it out for everybody. Don't just go, well, there's a lot of obstacles out there. Can't get over it. I mean, it was just so wishy-washy and flim-flam, and I think he's going to have to respond in some ways. I don't think you can just ignore these parents and these student athletes. And good for Justin Fields, Ben.
Yeah.
Well done by that young man. He doesn't need to do this. He's going to be a multimillionaire in about 6 months in the next NFL draft. He didn't need to do all this, but he's put his name out there. I'm really proud of that young guy.
And you think about how his reputation in the league started, right? He was the crybaby kid who couldn't hack it at Georgia and gets eligible, right? He's completely changed the narrative of what he's all about, and whether that was fair to him or not, that was the perception around the league. People were ticked off, and so were we, that he was eligible right away. And to no fault of his, it's just kind of something that happened, and yet now you have him, putting his health on the line when he totally doesn't have to do that. It speaks a lot to him and what he stands for. But yeah, this whole situation and the biggest problem with the commissioner now is this thing has gotten so out of control with the public, with the national writers, with the fans. It's gone past the landscape of just Husker fans now, and that's the big problem.
Yeah, no doubt. He just didn't make mistakes. Justin Fields, I think he didn't throw an interception until like week 9 or 10. I mean, he just didn't make mistakes. It was remarkable how well he played in a new offense, and he'd only been on campus about 9 months when the season started. It was impressive what he did. I did not anticipate him having that big of an impact on the Buckeyes, and boy, were they good last year.